Joe Frazier, popularly known as Smokin Joe, is a name etched in boxing history, synonymous with relentless pressure, a thunderous left hook, and a warrior's heart. But his life is far more complex than many knew. Years after his untimely passing, Joe's wife has broken the silence surrounding the hidden battles and truths of Joe Frazier's world. Will these change the way you see Joe Frazier forever? Well, there's only one way to find out. The love that forged a champion. Before he became a world-class champion, Joe had his South Carolina girl, Florence Smith, by his side in those formative, hungry years. Their love story began as just teenagers in the bustling city of Philadelphia, where Joe had moved to chase his boxing ambitions. In 1963, at just 19, Joe got married to Florence, who was 15 at the time, and together they navigated the treacherous path from obscurity to the bright lights of the championship. Florence had always been a rock for her husband, offering him the kind of steady support that made all the difference. One particular moment stood out when F. Bruce Baldwin, the president of Abbott's Dairies, approached him with a deal on the table. Joe was torn. He wasn't sure if it was the right move, so he turned to the one person he trusted most, Florence. She listened, thought it through, and encouraged him to go for it. He did, and it turned out to be one of the smartest decisions he ever made. Florence raised their 5 children: Jackie, Marvis, Wiata, Jonetta, and Natasha, often single-handedly, while Joe was consumed by his all-encompassing career. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. While the world saw the tough, fearless Smokin Joe, Florence saw the man behind the gloves. She saw his fears. She knew the moments when he felt unsure. And because she knew him like no one else did, her view remains one of the most revealing windows into who he truly was. But the same burning drive that helped Joe rise to the top also came with its share of pain. The love that helped shape a legend faced trials they never saw coming. The cracks began to show, and in time, their strong bond was tested in ways no one ever expected. Sadly, after 22 years together, Joe and Florence called it quits in 1985. While they were still married, Joe fathered children outside their marriage, which likely contributed to the strain on their relationship. Florence Smith became known to the public mostly because of her marriage to the heavyweight champion. The two kept their personal lives out of the spotlight, so details about their time together remain limited. Still, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that Joe's many affairs likely strained their bond. But before all the fame, the titles, and the troubles, who exactly was Joe Frazier? What was his life like before the world knew his name? Before the glory. Joe Frazier's first punch. Before Smokin Joe became a household name, he was Joseph William Frazier, a young man from Beaufort, South Carolina, with a dream bigger than the segregated South he was born into. His interest in boxing began in an unusual way. Back in the early 1950s, Joe's dad brought home a black and white television, and just like that, their home became the go-to spot for neighbors to gather and watch boxing matches. Folks would crowd around the screen, cheering on legends like Sugar Ray Robinson, Rocky Marciano, Willie Pep, and Rocky Graziano. Joe's mom saw a chance to make a little extra money and started selling drinks for a quarter while everyone watched. The Asian Crisis: Causes and Cures. One evening, as the crowd was settled in watching a fight, Joe's uncle Israel looked over at young Joe and noticed how solid and stocky he was. "That boy right there, he's gonna be another Joe Louis," he said out loud. Those words stuck with Joe. He didn't forget them. At school, Joe had already made a name for himself. His classmates knew he didn't back down from anybody. In fact, some of them would hand him a sandwich or a quarter, just so he would walk home with them after the final bell rang. Bullies wouldn't dare mess with Joe. He said it best himself. "Any scambooga who got in my face would soon regret it." Billy Boy could kick anybody's ass. The very next day, after his uncle's bold prediction, Joe got to work. He grabbed an old burlap sack and stuffed it with whatever he could find: rags, corn cobs, a brick, even some Spanish moss. He tied it up to a strong oak tree in their backyard and turned it into his own homemade punching bag. For the next 6-7 years, he later said, "Damn near every day, I'd be out there hitting that bag for an hour straight." Without gloves, he wrapped his hands with whatever he found around the house, his father's neckties or a stocking, just to keep practicing. Sadly, not long after he'd gotten serious about training, Joe had a rough run-in with the family's 300-pound hog. He thought it'd be funny to poke the hog with a stick and take off running. What he didn't expect was that the gate to the pig pen was wide open. The hog ran after him. In the scramble, Joe tripped and slammed his left arm against a brick. The injury was bad, and his arm was torn up pretty badly. But the family didn't have the money to take him to a doctor, so the injury had to heal on its own. His arm never quite straightened out after that. When Joe Frazier was just 15, he started working on a farm for a white family named the Bellamys. There were 2 brothers. Mac, the younger one, was more laid back, while Jim was tougher and a bit rough around the edges. One afternoon, a young black boy, probably around 12 years old, accidentally damaged one of the Bellamy's tractors. Jim completely lost it. Right there in the field, he took off his belt and used it on the kid. Joe saw it happen and couldn't keep it to himself. He went back to the packing house where the black workers were and told them what he'd just witnessed. Later, Jim confronted Joe and asked why he had spread the story. Joe played it off, saying he didn't know what Jim was talking about. But Jim didn't buy it. He warned Joe to leave the farm before he gave him the same belt treatment. Joe looked Jim in the eye and said firmly that he wouldn't tolerate being mistreated. He wasn't about to let anyone beat him. Jim stared at Joe for a moment, then finally said, "Go on, get the hell out of here." At that moment, Joe knew it was time to leave Beaufort. Things weren't going to get any better for him there. His mother saw it too. She pulled him aside and said, "Son, if you can't get along with white folks, then leave home. I don't want anything to happen to you." But getting out wasn't so simple. A bus ticket north was expensive, and the nearest station was in Charleston, 75 miles away. Luckily, in 1958, a Greyhound bus, known around town as the Dog, finally started stopping in Beaufort. That was Joe's chance. He had a brother named Tommy living in New York, and the family told Joe he could stay with him for a while. Still, he couldn't just pack up and leave. He needed to save up for the trip and have a little money in his pocket. So, he took a job at the local Coca-Cola plant. Joe recalled that the driver of the Coca-Cola truck, a white man, would always stay behind the wheel, while he did the heavy lifting, stacking, and unloading crates all day. Later, he joined a construction crew working on new homes for Marines at nearby Paris Island. That job kept him going until he had enough saved up to leave for good. 9 long months after he got kicked off the Bellamy farm, he packed his bag, got on that Greyhound bus, and rode through the night to a new life in Philadelphia. I climbed on the Dog's back and rode through the night. It was 1959. I was 15 years old, and I was on my own, he later said. It was in Philadelphia that Joe met Florence Smith, the woman who would change his life and help shape his future. But it wasn't just Florence who left a mark on him. Another encounter during that time would go on to define his entire boxing career. Encounter with Muhammad Ali, more than just a rivalry. Muhammad Ali. Just hearing the name brings to mind charm, drama, and unmatched talent in the ring. But for Joe Frazier, Ali was more than just a boxing rival. He was a shadow that followed him both in his career and in his personal life. In the beginning, Frazier and Ali weren't rivals. They actually shared a kind of friendship, or at the very least, they had each other's backs. There was a time when the respect between them was real, and even though they were both chasing greatness, there was a sense of mutual support. When Ali was stripped of his title and boxing license for refusing military service during the Vietnam War, Joe Frazier stood by him. Frazier lent Ali money when he needed it, stood up for him in front of Congress, and even reached out to President Richard Nixon, asking that Ali be allowed to return to the ring. Joe supported Ali's choice not to serve in the military. "If Baptists weren't allowed to fight, I wouldn't fight either," he once said, showing that he understood Ali's convictions. Joe believed in fairness, and he believed Ali deserved to fight. He saw Ali not just as a competitor, but as a fellow black athlete navigating a racially charged America. Joe genuinely felt he was doing the right thing, helping a man he respected. Florence, by his side, would have witnessed this generosity. Little did they know, this goodwill would be repaid with some of the harshest and most personal and racially charged jabs ever exchanged in sports history. Once Ali was reinstated and their epic trilogy of fights began, the greatest unleashed a relentless psychological war. He made it about politics, culture, and race. He painted himself as the brave revolutionary standing up for civil rights, while casting Joe as the white man's champ. Ali wanted to beat Joe in the fight that would later be known as the fight of the century. But not just that, he wanted to dismantle him, to belittle him. He used harsh language, including racially charged and demeaning terms to provoke Joe and gain psychological edge. These weren't just pre-fight hypes. They were deeply cutting insults that struck at Joe's dignity, his intelligence, and his very identity. Joe Frazier, on the other hand, refused to call him Muhammad and kept calling him by his birth name, Clay. At first, Muhammad Ali wasn't the beloved hero the world later came to admire. He was just a loud, confident young man trying to make his way in a country that was still grieving the shocking death of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. America needed someone to lift its spirits. The Beatles helped with that after their unforgettable US TV debut. Then, just 2 weeks later, a young Muhammad Ali, known then as Cassius Clay, stunned the world by beating the fearsome Sonny Liston to become the heavyweight champion. Clay was faster, taller, younger, and more agile, and it showed. Ali realized the country was desperate for heroes, and he leaned into that role. He modeled his image after flamboyant wrestler Gorgeous George, who understood one powerful truth: fans love a good story, and every hero needs a villain. Over time, Ali became the hero, but to keep that story going, he needed people to play the villain. Inside the ring, he turned his opponents into the bad guys: Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Ken Norton, Leon Spinks, and Ernie Terrell. But the rivalry between Ali and Joe Frazier wasn't just a sports story. It was one of the greatest rivalries in 20th century history. It was boxing's version of Yankees versus Red Sox or Lakers versus Celtics. But here's the twist. Ali may have made Frazier look like the villain, but in reality, Ali was the one who went too far. Joe Frazier was far from the Uncle Tom Ali called him. He was a hard-working, proud man from the blue-collar class who never backed down. No, He wasn't as flashy or as fast as Ali, but he earned his place among the greatest heavyweights in history. During an interview with Michael Parkinson, Ali was told, "Frazier's no Uncle Tom," and he shot back, "Then why does he keep calling me Cassius Clay when even my worst white enemies call me Muhammad Ali?" Ali had a way of turning the black community against Frazier. Because Joe didn't speak up about racial issues, Ali painted himself as the voice of the oppressed and made Frazier look like a sellout. Even journalist Bryant Gumbel jumped on that narrative, writing an article asking, "Is Joe Frazier a white champion with black skin?" To Frazier, this was betrayal. "That was just Clay trying to make me feel alone," he later said. "He thought it would mess me up before the fight. He was wrong. It didn't break me. It showed me who he really was." Ali's words had real consequences. Frazier's kids got bullied at school. His family needed police protection after getting death threats. Ali even said that if Frazier beat him, he would crawl across the ring and admit Joe was the greatest. After Joe won their first bout by unanimous decision, he called on Ali to keep his promise and crawl across the ring. But Ali refused, calling it a white man's decision and saying he was robbed. Things got even more personal before their second fight in 1974. During a TV interview, Ali kept insulting Frazier, calling him ignorant. Frazier got fed up, challenged him right then and there, and the two ended up brawling on the studio floor. Ali won that second match, but it was a non-title fight. In the lead-up to their last showdown, the legendary Thrilla in Manila, Ali's insults went overboard. He called Frazier ugly and dumb. At one point, he sparred with a man in a gorilla suit and punched a rubber gorilla doll, saying, "This is Joe Frazier's conscience. I take it everywhere I go." Promoter Don King said Frazier was furious and saw it as a full-on personal attack. Ali even took things too far the night before the fight, staging a prank outside Frazier's hotel, pretending to threaten him. What was meant to be a joke crossed a serious line. Years later, Ali told Marvis Frazier that many of his insults had only been promotional tactics. When Marvis told his father, Frazier simply replied, "You ain't me, son." Why isn't he saying that to me? In his 1996 autobiography, Smokin Joe, the autobiography of a heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Frazier never once referred to Muhammad Ali by that name. He called him Cassius Clay throughout the book, unless he was quoting someone else. That wasn't just being petty, it was personal. That name choice said everything about the pain and resentment Joe carried for years. And the anger didn't fade with time. When Ali, by then visibly battling Parkinson's disease, lit the Olympic flame at the 1996 Summer Games in Atlanta, many saw a powerful, emotional moment. But not Frazier, watching from afar, told reporters flat out, he wished he could have pushed Ali into the fire. He even said that Ali's struggle with Parkinson's disease was God's way of paying him back. That might sound harsh, but it came from a place of real pain. In 2001, Ali issued a public apology through the New York Times, saying, "In a way, Joe's right. I said a lot of things in the heat of the moment that I shouldn't have said. Called him names I shouldn't have called him. I apologize for that. I'm sorry. It was all meant to promote the fight." Frazier seemed to appreciate the gesture at first, or at least he acted like he did. But later on, he made it clear that the apology didn't mean much to him because it wasn't said to his face. "I'm still waiting for him to say it to me," Frazier said. When asked about it again, Ali reportedly joked, "If you see Frazier, you tell him he's still a gorilla." And in another interview, he added, "I wasn't going to get on my knees and crawl and beg him to forgive me." But by May 2009, Joe Frazier told Sports Illustrated that he had finally let the anger go. And when he passed away in November 2011, Ali was among those who came to pay their respects at Frazier's private funeral in Philadelphia. Jesse Jackson spoke during the service and asked everyone to rise and show love. Ali, despite his declining health, stood and clapped along with the crowd. Still, even in death, Frazier didn't quite get the recognition he deserved. Most of his obituaries framed him as little more than a side character in Ali's story, a supporting actor in the larger-than-life drama that surrounded the champ. Remember Sylvester Stallone's Rocky, the underdog story of a working-class Philly boxer who becomes world champion? That iconic movie made Stallone a household name, won him an Oscar, and earned him millions. But the truth is, Joe Frazier actually did all that stuff. No script, no special effects, just raw grit and real punches. Yet, when the city of Philadelphia decided to honor boxing with a statue near those famous museum steps, they didn't choose Frazier. They chose the fictional Rocky Balboa. Stallone, who lives in Beverly Hills and never stepped into a real ring against a heavyweight, got the spotlight. Joe Frazier, the man who gave everything to boxing and stayed loyal to his city till the end, was left in the shadows. That statue should have been of Joe, a working-class hero who earned his legacy the hard way. But maybe he was never given that chance because of the way Muhammad Ali painted him to the world, as the enemy, the other guy, the villain. And that will always be part of Ali's story too. The psychological warfare waged by Ali left an indelible mark on Joe Frazier, a wound that festered long after the final bell. Back home, the pressures of fame, the changing dynamics of their life, and Joe's own demons began to create fissures in his once solid foundation with Florence. What happens when the champion starts to lose his way? Not just in boxing, but in his own home. The other side of Smokin Joe. What the world never knew. Joe Frazier passed away on November 7, 2011, at the age of 67, after a short battle with liver cancer. He died in Philadelphia, where he had been receiving hospice care. Frazier was first diagnosed with the illness in late September of that year. After his death, the quiet surrounding his personal life slowly began to break. In a rare and emotional interview, his wife, Florence, opened up, sharing deeply personal truths that shocked fans and historians alike. Florence didn't speak out to damage Joe's memory. Instead, her words offered a clearer picture of the struggles and difficult decisions that had played out behind the scenes, things the world had never known. According to multiple trusted reports, the dark truth centered on Frazier's secret liaisons and the toll they took on both he and his family. It is now widely acknowledged that during the tumultuous years of his career, Frazier fathered children with other women while married to Florence. This confession, while controversial, proves the price of fame and the human weaknesses that every idol carries. Florence must have felt the anguish and betrayal. The private battles at home were as fierce as any of Smokin Joe's fight in the ring. The very foundation of their marriage was shaken by the repeated heartbreak of discovering secrets that even the most resilient partner might find unbearable. Joe Frazier had a big family. With Florence, he fathered 5 children. But that wasn't all. He also had 2 more kids, Rena and Hector, with a woman named Rosetta in the early 1960s. And the list didn't stop there. Derek, Joseph Rubin, Brandon, and Joseph Jordan were born from relationships with different women over the years. But then Denise Menz stands out. Joe met Denise at a party following one of his major victories, his fight against Buster Mathis. He was 24, riding high on success. She was just 19, a bold, determined young woman from New Jersey. Denise wasn't just a girlfriend. Over time, she became everything: his lover, his nurse, his office manager, his historian, his interior decorator, and most importantly, his companion through thick and thin. She even jokes that she has a PhD in Frazierology, a nod to just how well she knew him. After his spinal surgery in 2008, the two of them lived together in a cozy apartment that she personally decorated with style and warmth. Through the years, Denise stood by Joe, especially after he retired from boxing. She gave him the emotional boost he needed, helping him stay grounded and confident. Yet, despite Denise's devotion, Joe struggled with fidelity, a recurring issue that strained their relationship. His wandering eye caused more than a few arguments. Denise admitted that what hurt most was the betrayal. "I was so naive," she once said. "I knew I was the other woman, but I didn't know there were others." Joe's relationship with his children, from his marriage to Florence and other relationships, was also a significant part of his later life. Marvis, his eldest son, followed him into boxing and remained close. Jackie Frazier Lyde, his daughter, also became a professional boxer and famously fought Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, in a bout that echoed their father's legendary rivalry. The events surrounding Joe Frazier's life, whether whispered in private by those who loved him or pieced together from the public record, paint a picture of a man who achieved the pinnacle of success, yet never fully escaped the battles within himself and the shadows of his past. Can we truly understand Joe Frazier's legacy without first understanding Florence's pain, sacrifice, and silence? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.